Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about a couple of statements that were issued by none other than the the Finance Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Ismail. He says the current government saved Pakistan from default. Further stated that PTI's government pushed Pakistan towards default. Pakistan to remain committed to reforms and austerity. 5 billion drop in reserves due to large trade and current deficits, and imperative for rich people to pay their fair share of taxes. Now, the record increase in debt under PTI's government pushed Pakistan to default. Interestingly, couple of statements, they make some sense, but some of the statements do not make any sense. Interestingly, now when you look at it from another perspective today, the dollar was traded at 228 rupees, 228. Intrabank, it was 226.5. 228 was in the open market, and interestingly, dollar wasn't even available. You look at the stock market. The day before yesterday, it went down by 700 points, then by 1,000 points again in a negative zone today. Talking about the dollar, increased by almost 7 rupees yesterday, again almost 3 rupees today, and 5 rupees the day before that. Now, this is exactly what the current situation is. Political uncertainty is the major reason. The investors, the traders, everybody is in fact following a certain strategy that is normally used in the stock market, that is wait and see what happens. Because political turmoil can lead to absolute disasters. This is what the problem seems to be. I'm not going to compare the economy of Pakistan with Sri Lanka, but obviously Sri Lanka was, I think, one of those countries which were doing really well. People were pretty well educated out there. They had some decent amount in the reserves also, and on top of that, tourism was really flourishing. I mean, you land in Colombo and you will see at least 60-70% foreigners, because it was basically hub. Either you want to go to Maldives or other areas, Sri Lanka, Colombo was the center point. Now, interestingly, what we have witnessed over a period of time is that as far as our tax collection is concerned, in fact, we got more taxes than what we were expecting as far as the target, which was set around 6,000 billion, and we ended up getting 6,100 billion. So the case is with the current account deficit, obviously it's quite a lot, but I would say that a couple of schemes that were introduced by the government, even the previous one and the current one, which helped Pakistan. As far as exports are concerned, the main area where we need to look into is about the volume of export rather than the price, because obviously when the rupee is getting depreciated, obviously it is going to help the exporter. You talk about the utility bills. We all know where they are going at the moment, and there's going to be further increase. You talk about the petroleum products, though 96 to 97 dollars per barrel was the rate today. But the kind of subsidy that has been given, or the relief, that was just 18 rupees on petrol. So that isn't much, because if you look at the last 2 to 3 weeks, it was increased by almost 100 plus rupees. So many areas. You talk about your interest rate, that is 15%, one of the highest ever. Global recession is almost approaching because of the Ukraine-Russia war. The prices of these commodities, they have increased. They will further go up. You talk about energy crisis, that is right in front of you. Coal increased 5 times during 1 year, 5 times. You talk about gas, LNG in particular, that increased almost 10 times in 1 year. So this is the global phenomenon. Obviously, Pakistan is an oil importing country, so the effect is going to be there as well. And when you talk about the LNG issue, obviously the Europeans, they really need it, and need it urgently. And interestingly, they have more purchasing power than us. Pakistan is a developing country under extreme debt at the moment, so things are not that great. But let's start off from introducing you to the guest. We have with us in our studio. On my right is Fahim Sardar Saab, Senior Policy Specialist, SPPC. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. And on Skype, we have with us Shiko Atif, Senior Economist, author. Shiko Saab, pleasure to have you in the program, sir. Thank you very much for your time. And we'll also be talking to Amin Hashwani Saab, Senior Economist, a businessman from Karachi, and he's also going to join us on the telephone. Now, let me put the first question to you, Sardar Saab. Mr. Ismail Saab says that we saved Pakistan from default. So when you look at the IMF and their conditions, we have done so many shows on that. We are still not sure when we will get the first tranche. 1.17 was supposed to be given to Pakistan by this time. Not sure whether it has been given or not. Otherwise, it would have been stabilizing the dollar. And then, even the IMF gives all the money to us, will be still short of $4 billion. Correct, sir? That is the kind of money we are, in fact, trying to fetch from countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, etc. $1.5 billion worth of deferred oil payments from Saudi Arabia. That has also give us some sort of relief. What I'm saying now is that, sir, under these given circumstances, I mean, every government is going to blame the previous government for that. But currently, do you really believe that the current government has done exceptionally well, as Mifta Saab says, and they've been able to save Pakistan from default? Were we defaulting?
Thank you for having me. And I sort of disagree with the fact that we were defaulting. Pakistan is nowhere near default. We are in a liquidity crunch. What Pakistan is looking for right now is what's known as bridge financing, because a sudden upsurge in a liquidity crunch happened, and you see, we all have to manage our liquidity throughout the year. So there was an upsurge in the liquidity issue. That is what caused the problem. The rupee was being allowed to fall, which was inexplicable to me, at least. And secondly,
were you expecting it to go around 228? Because initially, if you remember, when it was around 180, 185, there were speculations that the IMF would like rupee to be around 220. Sir, it has gone up to 228, and now certain analysts do believe that this 250 could be the real value.
Well, I think we can speculate on what the price will be, but when the rupee depreciation, it was compounded by the fact that oil prices went up. So that's why we got a double. We got a double hit at the same time. But I just want to pull back a little bit, because we started this discussion with the IMF. A few days ago, the managing director of the IMF said something very interesting. She said that the forecast, economic forecast is very dark. These are the words she used. In April of this year, the IMF revised its global growth rate to 3.6. They revised it downwards to 3.6%. Mind you, 1 year before this, the IMF was saying close to 5%, somewhere roundabout. So even the international financial institutions are telling us very openly that there is a global issue that's happening right now. So we are not isolated from the global shock waves. So the IMF has categorically said that the global forecast is dark. They've used the word dark. 3.6% was projected in April. It was a downward revision. Now it's going to be further revised downwards.
Global growth.
Yeah. So we need to sort of take things into perspective as well. We, of course, we were more focused towards Pakistan, which we should be. Pakistan is doing everything that it can right now to adjust to, and I think Pakistan has done a good job, but the public and the private sector of Pakistan has done a fantastic job to adjust to what's happening right now. You just mentioned 2-3 facts. Taxes have exceeded the target, the tax collections. We are still growing. Our economy is still moving. And there is
But we've also reset a growth target as well.
Yes, we have brought it down to 4%. Yeah, that's fine. Let it be so. If the world is going to grow at around 3.2%, because from 3.6 they're going to bring it down further, IMF is about to reissue the growth rates. So if we're still going to grow above anything above 3% in such a situation, I think is good for Pakistan. If we could touch 6% as we were, that's even better.
That's what we did last year?
Twice. We did it in 2 consecutive terms.
5.97, I remember, yes.
If you round it off. So what I'm saying right now is that we do have a global recession that it's just around the corner, and we are part of it.
So ever since United States of America came into being, almost, let's say, 225 years, or maybe a little more, the interesting fact is that almost 44 different recessions have been witnessed by the Americans. 44.
Yeah.
So that means that after almost every 5 years or so, there's going to be a recession. Last one was in 2008. Correct, sir?
Yeah.
This is 2022. Means that it's been 14 years. So the next correction, the global correction, let me put it this way, is very much due, isn't it?
Yes, it would be, because we're basically running on a dollarized world economy, and if the dollar starts to depreciate, which it is, I mean, now the counter argument, I'll give the counter argument, is that the euro has just gone to an equal parity with
Almost
the dollar. So I'll get to that in a second. When the whole world is now has been for almost 70 years, it's been basing its economy on the US dollar. So the strength of the dollar is going to affect every economy. A report came out, I think, yesterday, that after 12 years, it's the first time that China has now reduced its holding of US debt to below 1 trillion. Now it is low, it's at the lowest point in 12 years. So why is China reducing the US debt?
Less dependency on
because they're trying to de-dollarize themselves as well, but they cannot do it because China and America are in a very tight embrace. One trying to do...
But for example, doing trade with Russia, rubles and yuan, or India doing trade in rubles and rupees, that is going to give a lot of edge to the Russian economy. And interestingly, despite all these sanctions, ruble perhaps is the only currency which gained value against the US dollar. It's from almost 87 to 56, if I'm not wrong. Whereas you talk about the Indian rupee, you talk about the Japanese yen, Chinese yuan, Pakistani rupee, even euro, they've all depreciated.
Yeah. So I mean, the world is being reset. The world financial markets are being reset, but that's in principle due to the debt economy that we live in. It's the fiat economy. That's a separate debate. I'm not going to get into that right now. The ruble basically was classified as one of the in inverted commas, the best performing currency. Why? Because it appreciated in value. Because they went back to the gold standard. They have made the ruble now convertible to gold.
But whether into export, not into import. Another reason.
Two more things that about Russia which people overlook. Number one, Russia is in energy terms self-sufficient. It pumps enough oil and it has enough gas, and food-wise. And I was going to do that. Secondly, Russia has enough firepower to protect itself, and it can really project, and it's also a member of the UN Security Council. So people sort of don't talk about these things. These things have a huge impact on a country.
This is the reality.
Yeah. So coming back to Pakistan, I think the government has done whatever it could, and even the finance minister today said that in the coming days things are supposed to ease up. IMF is a go. When IMF is a go, you get more institutions lined up for the funding part. So I think in the coming days we should expect something good. But having said that, I want to be very clear about one thing. The rupee needs to be revalued gradually back to a natural level. Right now this is a speculative level.
And what should be the natural level? 200?
In my, according to my estimates, it should be around 160.
160, 160.
Yeah, that's my estimate, my professional estimate.
Provided everything remains constant and perhaps better for Pakistan. But let me also engage now our friend Shiko Atif Saab, who's a senior economist and author. Shiko, now obviously one major factor is indeed about the situation that is prevailing currently in the political arena. The political temperature is pretty high. Uncertainty, unfortunately, is prevailing everywhere. Look at the effect of the latest by-elections. I mean, 20 seats, and then out of those 20, 15 were won by Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, 4 by PMLN, and 1 was independent. But now the point is that is this the only reason for the pressure on rupee, number one? Or do you think that the way the stock market has behaved in the last 3-4 days, or perhaps the way dollar has gained strength against rupee, or rather rupee has weakened against dollar, let me put it this way, is another very important, I would say, perspective in this particular regard. Tell us, what exactly do you see happening now?
A couple of things. Firstly, you mentioned, just to put a slight positive spin on our situation, one thing we fail to understand is the difference between macroeconomic situations and microeconomic situations as a nation. there is stuff that happens globally that impacts us that you, in your previous conversation, you did an awesome job of throwing some light on. Let me just say this, over the past 2 months, so US dollar is not the only economy, not the only currency in the world. Pakistani rupee gained against the euro, Pakistani rupee gained against the British pound, and Pakistani rupee gained in value against the Japanese yen. So now dollar is going through a generational shift upwards, and only Pakistani rupee is not weakening in the face of the US dollar. The euro is weakening, British pound is weakening. Every currency, almost every currency in the world is weakening against the mighty dollar. So there is that thing. The reason, there is absolutely no economic reason right now for the rupee to depreciate. I will tell you 2 things that are happening right now, and the present government has actually done an amazing job of controlling our imports. Our imports, as we speak with each other, for this month, have only been 2.6 billion rupees, which is, to give you some idea, even on the best of times, or even in the best of months, we do about 7 billion or something like that. So it's about the 19th, 20th of the month, and out of even that, 700 million was oil imports. So what the government has done is they've done a pretty good job of balancing, putting a quoting of imports while maintaining a sufficient amount of exports going on. So they have actually put a freeze on 41 dozen products on the import of that. Now the reason for our growth slowing down is because, unfortunately, 60% of our exports require imports as raw materials. So the government has actually made a pretty good judgment on what to put a ban on so that it doesn't hamper our exports, while it puts a slowdown on the imports. So that balancing act is going on in Pakistan, and they've done a pretty good job on that. So there is no reason on the current account side for the rupee to depreciate. Now, there is, however, one major reason for the rupee depreciating at this time, and that, Faisal Saab, you touched upon it in the previous conversation, and that is speculation. The speculators in the market are actually...
But speculation is the name of the game. I mean, even rumors, these stock markets, they, as they say that, always buy on rumors. So perhaps, I mean, if there's a rumor in the market, or everybody has its own, perception towards the overall economic turmoil. Now, the point is, sir, in one of these statements, Mr. Ismail Saab very categorically mentioned that this panic in the market is primarily due to the political turmoil. Yes, we understand, we agree with that, which will subside in a few days. Now, what if PMLN loses the Punjab government, and what if they retain that?
Yes. So there are a couple of policies. Now, I want to sort of speak as politically as possible. However, as far as the energy sector is concerned, the PMLN government has people like Mr. Shahid Haqqan Abbasi, who is a global expert in the field of energy, and the agreements that he's sort of managed to sign in the LNG area are being talked about globally as well. So if PMLN retains that side of the fence, and a couple of things that this present government has done is, now, the previous government, with the best of intentions, offered some subsidies. So has this government. What is the difference between forgive me. What is the? Let me just quick thought. The difference between those subsidies and these subsidies is the targeting of the poorest of the poor. A subsidy like petrol, cheap petrol for everyone, benefits the very wealthy as much as the very poor. Whereas the PMLN has done this, what they have done is they have offered subsidies to the poorest of the poor.
Yeah, the targeted subsidies, yes.
Sir.
Now, sir, we have also been joined in, sir. Shikhar Saab, we have been joined in by Amin Hashwani Saab, senior economist, businessman from Karachi. Assalamu alaikum, Amin Saab.
Ji, assalamu alaikum. How are you?
I'm pretty good, sir. Good to have you on the show after many years. You used to be a very regular guest when I was in Karachi. But anyway, good to have you in the program. Now, sir, I'll just read out something. One of the political analysts, and rather, let me put it this way, the financial analyst, he believes and he says that the free fall in the rupee's value was continuing because the markets were without the economic guidance amid the evolving political situation. Do you agree with this?
So yeah, I think as I said, truth lies somewhere in between. So I think everyone knows there is, first of all, there's a global crisis, inflation, energy and food inflation, war going on, etc. So it's a very difficult thing, and as we were reeling and recovering from the COVID thing globally, going into a kind of inflation and a kind of a deflationary environment. So we know it's a very challenging external environment, and it's not just Pakistan. There were 60 plus countries that are import dependent, are suffering and are wobbling the economy. In Pakistan, I think the problem has been that today we have a political uncertainty as well, plus the IMF program. So I think it's kind of a perfect storm on three fronts: the IMF program, the domestic political uncertainty, especially post the Punjab election, and a very challenging external economic environment. These three, you're seeing an outcome of these three factors.
Now, sir, another factor, since we were talking about this, rather any form of financial guidance under these given circumstances, what do people need to do, sir? Like we always use this term of wait and see strategy in the stock market. Let's see. Do you think the coming days, today is Wednesday, tomorrow is another working day, Thursday, and then Friday. So we have seen the way the rupee has reacted towards the dollar, plus on top, the kind of political pressure that we have also witnessed. The political temperature rather has gone really up. 22nd of July, I believe that is a very important date. Do you think that the investors, the stock market brokers, and all those who deal with currency in general, or money market, they represent the money market, perhaps really need to be very careful, cautious till that particular date, or you believe that risk taking is going to worth it?
So look, here's the thing. Despite of all the analytics people do on markets, I still believe it's primarily driven by fear or greed, right? It's a very emotionally driven financial equity markets all over the world. And the feel-good factor is gone. And I feel that, the markets really cannot do anything proactively. Markets will always react, right, to a set of given environment. And environment is, of course, economic and political. External environment is beyond our control. But what is directly in our control is the politics, right? So we live in this political economy where successive governments, without exception, and I say without exception, have not taken the tough decisions, and they've kind of, kicked the can down the aisle and not taken the tough structural reforms. And you can go into the public sector, privatization, you can go into the energy sector reforms. And now each of the major political party has no excuse. All of them got substantial time, and none of them really did. Of course, you can't say none of them did anything. They all did, but just wasn't enough for us to really have some meaningful, long-term, sustainable reforms It just wasn't good enough as much as it was needed. So we have this political economy. What we can do is that we de-link politics from economics. If you can just do that, and that is in our...
But sir, they're so closely interlinked. Even if you try, you can't do that.
Of course. No, they are interlinked, but we have to de-link. You see, that is the whole thing. So they are interlinked precisely. Therefore, we need to de-link. So at least create a political certainty. So one case in point.
So what you say perhaps is somewhat what we have earlier also heard about, and that is about the Charter of Economy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I've been talking of this since last 10 years on your shows, that you have to do that, because it's very simple, right? To do structural reform, it's painful. The benefits come long term. For that, you have to pay short-term costs. So the short-term cost, if you're going to play cheap politics, no government can really undertake that. So you need everyone to sign on the dotted line, all the political parties, whether they're in government or in opposition, that they will stick to this Charter of Economy. And if you see, all the Asian countries, the Asian tigers, they all underwent through, even China went almost for 30 years, an entire generation went and, had a very frugal lifestyle before they really had the economic miracle. So there are no...
And obviously consistency in the policy, that is also named.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So one case in point is, it's the IMF agreement currently, right? The previous government signed on it. The current government is implementing it. Okay, how difficult is it for the opposition and to say that yes, we have signed up on this thing. It's a painful agreement and it's being implemented. We support it, right? How difficult is that? They were the one who signed on it, right? So instead of playing cheap politics and saying "Mehngai ho gayi" and inflation and hammering the government, they at least need to be honest and say that, guys, we've signed on it. It's a good thing. It's a painful reform. Just this one thing, that the government and the opposition come on the same page of implementing the IMF agreement that has already been signed and owned by both the government, the opposition and the previous government and the current government. How difficult is that? If we just do that, that we take away the political uncertainty, and you will see the markets will react. Do not expect the markets to be proactive or the investor. Investor will look at their own risk rewards wherever they will be able to get it, right? So please do not expect. So the onus has to be on the politics.
All right. Thank you very much, Hashwani Shah, for your comments. Coming to you, Siddharth Shah. I'll in fact name the gentleman, Zafar Paracha, who is the Exchange Companies Association of Pakistan's General Secretary. He has blamed the current government for what is happening to Rupee.
Okay.
And he has also said that they are not taking the appropriate measures to control what's going on. And at the same time, when you talk about the State Bank of Pakistan, they have said that let the market decide. Let the market forces, do whatever they want to do. Now, sir, according to you, Rupee should be around 160 after everything is taken care of, IMF or otherwise. But, sir, a lot of people believe that, we might not see that kind of reduction. It will still hover over 200, no matter how good the economy is. Now, do you think that the State Bank of Pakistan has always, I still remember when Miftah Saab was the finance minister in the 2013 government, Ishaq Dar Saab went away, he became the finance minister, and I still remember when dollar was a little over 100 rupees, 107 something, they intervened. Around $3 billion were floated in the market through this permission of the State Bank, obviously, and they brought it down to 99 rupees in double digits. So yes, if the State Bank wants to intervene, they can. Do you think they should intervene? They should not intervene? Because at the end of the day, sir, whatever number we end up having, India is at 80 rupees a dollar, despite all odds. We used to be 1 to 1.5 against the Indian rupee. So technically speaking, 80 plus 40 is 120. That's where we should have been. But sir, we are slightly over 105 on top of that.
No, true. Just going in the reverse order, the Indian currency is slipping right now. It's not supposed to be at 80. It was supposed to be at 65, 70. So we need to take that, and that's a separate debate. Well, I won't get into that. At the end of the day, whenever somebody says that a market needs to be free, that's the right concept. But I want to see one single market on earth that is not managed.
Every market is managed, sir. Don't you think the role of Federal Reserve, can you eliminate that in your systematic?
So
they cannot.
They do it on a minute-to-minute basis. I mean, they're looking at where the dollar stands and how it trades in comparison to other countries. If just to quote one of the terms of the U.S. international trade philosophy, there is to constantly seek better terms. This is their objective. They're constantly looking for better terms. So when it comes to the Pakistani rupee, I am of the view, yes, we cannot peg, we can't have a number in our head and we just peg our rupee to that number and then take loans and then throw them in the market. That's something very dangerous. But there are multiple other ways of handling a currency. And you basically have to, one of the things that is, since I'm from the market, I mean, one of the things that is critical is psychology. You have to manage the market psychology. Right now, in my opinion, I said this many times in your recent, in our recent discussions, that minimum 10% is speculative. Minimum. I mean, I'm sure it's much more than this. What is happening right now is that people are just buying dollars, keeping them at home. Now, what happens if the dollar...
$1.1 billion were withdrawn from the commercial banks.
Yep.
Recently.
So basically,
1.1 billion.
Yeah, so they're basically keeping them...
Uncertainty.
Keeping them at home. They're not selling them. So if, let's say, half of that came into the market, what would happen? The rupee would start to rise all of a sudden because it's just a demand and supply thing. So if you remove supply from any market, the price will rise. It is as simple as that. So right now what Pakistan needs to do is, of course, we have to have a managed market. You cannot have a free market in anywhere. I mean, it's just not feasible or tenable.
Managed market means that you're talking about the intervention of the institutions like State Bank, for that matter, SCCP, or Ministry of Finance. I mean, and it's right in front of you.
Yep. So when the yen would become too weak in front of the U.S. dollar, I'm going to the 90s, America would demand that the Bank of Japan start to, strengthen the yen, because that would affect exports. Right now, if we are at 220 rupees,
Japanese are very happy with the weak yen because of the exports.
Precisely. So if we have a weak rupee right now, our exports should be going through the roof. They are rising, but they're not going through the roof right now. So the problem is something else. Our diagnosis has to be very clear. We have to be very clear that right now we need to manage our markets, and there is no law, there is no caveat which is stopping us from managing our affairs. So we need to keep that in mind. And I think there's a huge speculative aspect to how the rupee is trading right now. As far as the stock market is concerned, because I've been a practitioner, the stock market is basically, this is the fourth time the stock market went for a launch and then something happened. This is the fourth time in the past.
It's around 40,000 mark now.
Yeah. So this, I mean, it was about to launch. Every single time it's about to launch, something happens, and then it sort of gets delayed. It is going to go up at the right time, but going up means inactivity.
Right time means post-elections, or even the announcement for the elections is going to be the right time?
I think certainty is the word, and I mean certainty can be taken in any direction, but the moment there is more certainty in the market, you will see better activity. And I'm not talking about the levels of the market.
But even if the current government is able to keep their hold in Punjab as well as in the federal capital, that is not going to be for more than 1 year. Is this 1 year a short-term kind of an approach, or you believe that no?
I think right now everything's up for grabs, but I think it's perhaps slightly short-term. because anything less than 1 year is typically short term, 1 to 3 years is mid, and 3 onwards is long term. But right now what Pakistan needs to do, coming back to the rupee thing, is that the rupee needs to be managed, and you cannot just let market forces, so what, I mean, if you have a bad day in the market, we're just supposed to absorb it? No, we're supposed to keep it in a band. There's a lower band, and then there's a lower level, and then there's an upper level that creates a band. You're supposed to allow it to trade freely within that band. If there's no
given parameter.
Exactly. You're not supposed to just let it, go in any direction that it feels like going.
Like we have this capping system in the stock market, like 5% up or down, rather down in fact. There's no limit for the up, but they can always...
There's a limit for the up as well. It's a 7% limit.
It's a 7%?
Yeah, 7.5 if I'm not mistaken.
And 5% for the lower?
Yeah, there's a floor and then there's a ceiling.
Okay.
So everything is managed within a band.
So that's what I'm saying. I mean, these are managed. I mean, otherwise...
But we're allowing the rupee to so-called trade freely, which I have serious reservations about. And the moment if dollars are dumped into the Pakistani market, and I want to be very clear here, many people who are speculating right now are going to incur a lot of loss by holding onto dollars, because the rupee is going to start to rise. They would have bought dollars at a different level. They'll have to sell at a different level.
Even if trading is still taking place at 228.
Yeah.
So obviously dollars are always needed. Now coming to you, Sugar Sahab, a couple of points here. A lot of analysts, they believe that the stock market, I mean, when we use this word of correction, it has been corrected. It's an ideal scenario. All it needs now is political uncertainty. So as I was talking to our other guests also, the 22nd July is going to be very important. Still 2 more working days as far as stock market is concerned, or dollar trading is concerned. Now, please tell us one important factor. One aspect is 15% of your interest rate, where you have also lowered your growth target. Inflation, government gives a different digit, financial analysts in Pakistan give a different one, and perhaps the international markets, they tell us a very different story. So let's suppose if inflation is well under 20%, let's suppose your interest rate is 15%. Now, this is the mechanism. They always try to increase the interest rate to put a check on the inflation. But, sir, this is more about the food inflation in Pakistan. It's more related on the demand and supply issue. During these recent rains, what I've been told, I mean, the kind of info I got, that most of these go-downs, whether you talk about Karachi or even in Punjab or in KP, you talk about the sugar, wheat, or any food produced for that matter, sir. A lot of destruction. This is what will be reported in the coming days once the water level, goes down and communication starts to take place. I mean, people would commute and then they would tell you what exactly has gone wrong. So many areas where there was agricultural produce, those areas or the lands, they've been destroyed, and for this particular year, there's not going to be many areas where you'll see that kind of farming taking place. So I'm just giving you, adding to what exactly is happening. Global scenarios right in front of you. You talk about the Russian and Ukrainian produce of wheat. 22 million tons are still in the storage facilities, in the warehouses in Ukraine. They cannot export that. Next year's harvest they cannot do. Where will they keep that wheat? Russia is self-sufficient. The rest of the globe, especially developing countries, are